Hello, my name is Wendy Muma, and I'm president of the board of Conscious Capitalism of Central Maryland. We're excited you've decided to come here today. Welcome to the fourth of 5 virtual workshops offered by Conscious Capitalism of Central Maryland. We have a wonderful strategic partner for these series of 5 virtual workshops. 1776 is a network of entrepreneurial incubators that exists to help entrepreneurs succeed and reach maximum potential. They have a vast resource of mentors and virtual programs to help entrepreneurs work remotely and safely. 1776 hopes these workshops will bring a sense of connectivity and engagement. Conscious Capitalism of Central Maryland thanks 1776 for their strategic partnership. Welcome to It's Alive, Conscious Culture and the Evolving Business. Eboni Adams Monk has over 20 years of experience leading cross-functional teams. She currently works as Director of Marketing for W.R. Grace, a specialty chemical company with headquarters in Columbia, Maryland. Her love of leadership, business, and culture led her to the Conscious Capitalism of Central Maryland chapter, where she serves as Vice President. Her forthcoming book about leadership and culture is scheduled for release late in the summer of 2020. And now I'll leave it to you, Eboni.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And again, welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here. This is the 4th workshop in our 5-part series. So far, we've had compelling looks at purpose and leadership and stakeholder orientation. And today we are talking about culture, conscious culture to be specific. So I'm glad to be here. I will introduce culture, that topic, and lay the foundation for you. And then later we'll have a guest speaker who will come on and deepen the conversation about culture. But to kick this off, let's look at a video and see what some prominent business leaders have to say about the topic of culture.
So much evidence these days to show that values-driven cultures produce high returns, high performance, and simply the best companies on the planet to work for. Over the past 10 years, we've mapped the values of over 1,000 organizations in over 50 different countries. And what we found is that the organizations where they have a current culture which has a strong set of values, which not only align with people's personal values, but also align with what people would like to see as a desired culture, these organizations are the most profitable by a long way. And we're operating out of an old paradigm of leadership. But if you look at it from a consciousness perspective, we're really operating out of a paradigm of what's in it for me, as opposed to what's best for the common good. So instead of being the best in the world, we need to be the best for the world. This is a shift, best in the world to best for the world.
Honor, respect, care for, protect, and reward your employees, regardless of title or position.
People who are in positions of leadership are recognizing that their leadership must be values-based.
Well, the culture part, I had actually started a company called Link Exchange with a college roommate back in 1996, and we grew that to about 100 or so people and then ended up selling the company to Microsoft. But what most people don't know is that the reason we ended up selling it was because the company culture just went downhill. We didn't know any better to pay attention to it, so we hired all the people with the right skill sets and experience, but they weren't culture fits.
Values, the values piece of paper in your organization should be one of the 2 most tattered pieces of paper you have. The other one is the job description of your employees. But the values should be looked at, lived, and talked about and encouraged on a daily basis. Values are a written reminder of the only acceptable behavior you can have in an organization. The number 1 value at WD-40 is, we're going to do the right thing. That's what we're about, is doing the right thing.
With Zappos, wanted to make sure we didn't make that same mistake again. And so pretty much from the beginning paid attention to company culture.
The right people are self-disciplined, or self-motivated, or self-managed, or self-obsessively driven to make great results, or self-learners. And as we wrote in Good to Great, the moment that you begin to feel the need to tightly manage someone, you might have made a hiring mistake.
The old model to me was all about the leader having the answers. Now it's about the leader having the questions and the power being, invested into the people, the followers. And that's, I think, in business, what we're talking about in terms of the change in the business model. It's not about just getting that short-term fix of results. It's about understanding the longer-term implications.
Because it's difficult to change your culture. Now, why might that be? It's difficult to change your culture because you have to change yourself.
Yes.
That's a very powerful video. When I saw that, I knew it was something that I wanted to share with this group, and it's a great way to kick off this discussion about culture. You heard the words coming from these prominent leaders from organizations that we've heard of, Southwest and Coca-Cola and Zappos. But in talking with professionals across industries, it's clear to me that we all recognize that culture is important. Look at us, we're all here today because culture is important. But it's something that we sometimes take for granted. It's not uncommon for organizations to actually overlook culture as a key to success. But the stats and the evidence is striking. So here are a few things to show you. Studies actually indicate that 46% of job seekers believe company culture is an important factor in choosing to apply to the company. And 91% of managers actually look for candidates whose alignment fits with that company's culture. And in fact, they say that cultural fit is just as important, if not more important, than an employee's skills and experience. Another stat, about 1/3 of job seekers indicate they'd actually take a pay cut to work for a job they really love in a company with a company culture that they love as well. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people, about 24% are more likely to quit working for a company if they are not happy with the company's culture. So there are many stats, and what's interesting for me is that great culture means attracting great talent. And that combination intuitively means higher levels of employee engagement, which means less turnover. But it also means that companies have the ability to achieve higher revenues and profitability. And we heard that very clearly in the video. So what is culture? Let's spend a moment talking about that. For some, culture is the heartbeat of an organization. It's the thing that keeps it alive. I love to think of culture as the soul of an organization. It's what we see. It's what attracts us to buy goods from a company. It's what makes us work for a company. It's what keeps an organization alive and helps it to authentically express itself. And I would say, with all respect to the previous principles, that of all the conscious capitalism principles, culture is the sexiest. It's layered, it's dimensional, even mysterious in some ways. Now, it's easy for me, an artist at heart, to talk about culture in these very poetic terms, maybe even a bit cliche. So let's get technical and dive into some definitions for just a moment. If you ask anyone what culture is, you'll get a lot of answers. So let's take a quick poll. The question is, what is culture? What is your definition of culture? You can see here on the screen, there are 4 definitions in front of you, A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to ask you all to weigh in and let us know what culture is to you. So is it a set of living relationships working toward a shared goal, something that you are, something that you do, that comes from Daniel Cole, from the author of the Culture Code? Is it a set of shared values and beliefs and norms that can be observed through practices and behaviors and artifacts? That thing that gives one company a different feel from another. That's from the Winfield United Culture process. Is it the internal personality of a brand, made up of collective personalities and interactions of people on the team that's from company folders incorporated? Or is it the how of what a company does, where its focus is on how employees and clients and customers are treated? So I'll ask you guys to weigh in on your definition of culture. I'm anxious to see the results.
They're coming as we speak. 12 of 21 have voted.
I know it's a little difficult for those of you who didn't have an answer off the top of your head. You're thinking about this a little bit, trying to figure out which one of these culture is.
14 of 21.
Oh, come on, just pick an answer. Just pick one, just pick one.
There may be multiple options available, I'm just saying. 71% have voted. All right, just a few more. I'll end the poll.
And the winner is... It looks like they're all pretty close there, but if you look at that second one, set of shared values, beliefs, and norms that can be observed, followed secondly by a set of living relationships, and then you've got the last two. I see Dr. Fischer there shaking his head. Yes, he's like, yeah. And so what I'll say about this is, if you found this to be difficult and it took you a long time to pick an answer, I'm not surprised, because there are actually different definitions of organizational culture. And people naturally place weight on the elements of culture that resonate with them the most. For this exercise, in my opinion, all of the answers are actually correct. And you might find that the way you score this today may look differently than how you might score this in a year or two, or if you were to switch to a different organization. And that's because because cultures evolve and organizations are different. And there may be certain elements of these different definitions that resonate with us over a period of time. So I thank everyone. Thank you guys for weighing in on our What is Culture poll. To get a better appreciation of the role of culture and the importance of culture in businesses, for a moment, let's just take a journey back to the roots. So the term organizational culture was introduced in 1951 in the book, The Changing Culture of a Factory. I won't go into all the details of the book, but the book studied corporate group behaviors. And since then, researchers and leaders have explored the culture of different organizations and how people relate to each other. The pull to study group culture is a natural one. It's born of an attraction to understand how people relate in groups, how groups have evolved and also thrived, not just over the past 100 years, but actually, if you look at its roots, over thousands of years. And that brings this conversation to me for just a moment, because I personally relate to this natural pull to understand culture. Personally, culture is my passion. And as I was delving into the topic, I began to recall my time as a teenager, beginning to study my own cultural roots in West Africa. And that process of learning about how the community related to each other and reflected the culture was pretty exciting. And so when I began working in corporate America 20 plus years ago, I was naturally interested in the culture that I observed and was also a part of. And I realized that there were parallels in my work environment to my personal observations about culture. Couple of takeaways. Culture can be a very powerful connector. It connected me in a very deep way to people with which I shared common goals and values at my workplace. It also challenged my beliefs about the work and how I showed up there. Over time, in some of my experiences, that work and that culture actually grew to embody a sense of love and connection to something much bigger than myself. And that brings me back to conscious culture. If we put that definition up again, conscious Capitalism defines conscious culture as one that fosters love and care and builds trust between a company's team members and its stakeholders. It includes accountability, transparency, integrity, loyalty, egalitarianism, fairness, and personal growth. And it acts as an energizer and a unifying force that truly brings a business, a conscious business, to life. So let me just pause for a moment and ask you to think about your own company. Think about your own organization. Do the words love and care come immediately to mind? Is there really trust? And does your company support your personal growth? Do they even care? Is it truly alive? Has your company endured the storms that inevitably affect businesses, requiring it to reach its heart and its soul to succeed? Have challenges forced you to evolve your culture? All important questions. And challenges are meant to make you stronger and more resilient. It's meant to teach and open the way for better ways of doing business. So when we think about the evolution of culture, we know that there are certain elements required to evolve a culture. In the Leader's Guide to Corporate Culture, the Harvard Business Review calls them the 4 levers for evolving a culture. And these levers include communicating the vision, selecting and developing leaders who align with the target culture, talking openly about culture and the importance of change, and then finally changing the organizational design to align with the desired change. So it's all about making sure that we infuse our current situation, our current culture, with elements that we want for the future. So we've talked about culture, we've talked about the definition, we've talked about evolution of culture. Let's talk just for a moment about the purpose of culture. The purpose of culture is to unite people. That's high level, that's what it is. But the purpose of business culture is to connect people to the company's goals and prescribe ways in which the company expresses itself. Conscious culture requires organizations to be purposeful and intentional about their culture. Conscious businesses often extend their culture into their branding, their policies, sponsorships, and the way in which they relate to the community around them. In order to evolve your culture, you have to first understand the type of culture that your organization has. So how do you know? How do you know what type of culture you work in? And how do you know if that culture is actually working well or if it's lacking something? Culture is not a one-size-fits-all. I'm sure everybody agrees with that. And perhaps that's why organizational culture can be a bit complex. We can feel it, we can describe it, but it's a little difficult to measure. So the engineer in me appreciates a culture framework developed by researchers at Spencer Stewart. The framework illustrates 8 types of cultures in relation to how employees interact and how they respond to change. A little bit of a busy chart here, so I'm going to spend a moment just walking you through this. The horizontal axis shows the bounds of whether people act independently or their level of collaboration. So from left to right, if you're on the left side of that axis, people act more independently, more entrepreneurial. On the right side, there's more room for collaboration and relationships and interdependence. The vertical axis measures how flexible people respond to change. So on the top, very flexible all the way to being more rigid, more stable at the bottom side of that. And what this does is it creates 4 quadrants in this particular framework. So I want you to think about something as I continue to dig into this chart for a moment. I want you to ask yourself where your company or your organization fits in this framework. So just think about how people interact and how people respond to change. And we'll also have some examples of companies and that you've heard of and where they sit on this framework as I walk you through this. So as a first example, purpose would be very much connected with Whole Foods. They have a purpose, a culture that's more related to purpose. So you'll find more examples over in the chat. So let's dig into this for just a moment. And remember, you're keeping in the back of your mind, asking yourself where your organization fits on this framework. So where a company finds themselves on the axis is an indication of the company's culture. This is only one way. There are many, many ways. Often companies will find that they sit in more than one place on the graph, and that's where the fun actually begins. This graph highlights that companies must often make trade-offs based on their capabilities and their goals, okay? So as an example, and I'm going to read for just a moment, the Harvard Business Journal reports that it's common to find organizations with cultures that emphasize both results and caring. So let's look at that for a moment. You'll find results in the lower left quadrant there, where people act fairly independently. And then you'll also find caring in the upper right quadrant. So what does this mean? According to the Harvard Business Journal, this combination can be a bit confusing for employees. Are they expected to optimize individual goals and strive for outcomes at all costs, as indicated by that results-oriented culture? Or should they work as a team and emphasize collaboration and working together to achieve certain goals, as indicated in the caring style? The nature of the work or the org design may make it difficult for employees to be equally results-focused and caring, unquote. In contrast, let's take a look at a culture that emphasizes caring and order. So both of those are on the right side of this chart, which means that they actually reinforce each other in a positive way. What happens here is that a culture that emphasizes caring and order encourages a work environment in which teamwork, trust, and respect are paramount, according to the Harvard Business Journal article. The article goes on to say the benefits are strong loyalty, retention of talent, lack of conflict, and high engagement. I think that sounds good, maybe, but there are challenges. The challenges are a tendency toward groupthink, an over-reliance on consensus-based decisions, and avoidance of difficult issues. Certainly, challenges that can present an organization from moving forward to do the things that they want to do. So what does this mean for business owners and leaders? Leaders who are more focused on results and learning might find the combination of caring and order that we saw on the right side of that graph stifling when they seek to drive change, entrepreneurship, and move toward a company achieving its goals. Understanding the context of the organizational environment helps us as leaders and business owners to understand how to align with and shape the culture. This is critical when we're trying to implement change, determine where additional supports may be needed in parts of our organization, and also to predict the impact of a leader with their individual leadership style and the impact they'll have on an organization. That's all from the Harvard Business Journal article. So back to our question, I didn't forget about it. I asked you guys to think about where you sit, your organization sits on that graph. So within this framework. So you've got it there on the screen. Let's see if a few of you will weigh in and let us know where you think your organization sits. And maybe you find that you fit in 2 or 3. Anyone have any inputs there? Where does your company fit on the model? Is your company more results oriented, more about safety? I'm seeing 1, purpose. This is Sherry saying purpose, but we definitely have a results oriented tendency with an eye on the purpose. That's a really good combination. And it's, I bet, an interesting challenge for leaders to work in purpose and also achieve results. It can be difficult sometimes, particularly with board of directors who might tend to focus on results. I have another comment here. Past organization was definitely in the lower left quadrant. It was a tough environment. That's really interesting. This comment is from Tara, and that combination, results, authority, and if you just think about the images that come to mind if you work in a culture that is results and authoritative, where people are driving for results, maybe not collaborating, getting input from people who work within that particular organization, it can be pretty difficult, especially for people who are driven to collaborate and driven to want to contribute toward that end result. A house full of entrepreneurial A-types, that's right. Former organization, results, reactive rather than proactive. That's really good input. You know, I thought this would be a good exercise for us to look at, because a lot of times I hear people saying, well, I just don't like my company, or I don't like the culture. And then when you begin to ask people, well, what is it that you do or you don't like about it? They begin to describe some of the styles that we actually see on that framework. So I think it's an interesting way to represent our needs as an employee in cultural terms. And it could be a way for us to communicate to those around us our needs, right? Or some of the places that the organization can change, can shift to support the employees. So thank you all for weighing in there. So let me wrap this up. Since I began this presentation, I've probably said culture about 1 million times. Culture, organizational culture, business culture. We've talked about what it is, how it can impact an organization, and you've had a glimpse into the kind of styles that your own organizations have. And all of this is really great. And considering the complexity of this topic, I want you to take a couple of things away from this introduction to conscious culture. And that is that culture is alive, it evolves, and it's a powerful force. And as Dr. Fischer would say, it evolves with or without us, which brings me to a couple of big questions for today and tomorrow. How will the pandemic change business culture? And when we reach this balancing point of understanding how people and how companies have changed their business models and changed their work practices, what does that mean for our cultures? And how do we begin to plan for these changes that we know are coming? And just as that the conscious culture definition says, how can we really be more intentional about our company culture? So I won't attempt to answer all these questions. I'm going to leave it to an expert, and I'm going to introduce you to our guest speaker, who I'm so delighted to have today. Dr. Christopher Fischer is joining us. All of my questions and pondering led me to seek out some other people, and Dr. Fischer was one of the people who came on my radar, and I'm so proud to introduce him to you all today so he can shed more light on business culture. He is the Director of Strategic Talent Resource Group within the Business Development Services at Land O'Lakes in Arden Hills, Minnesota. And he has several years of experience in industrial organizational psychology, human resource consulting, and talent management. In addition, Dr. Fischer has operated his own consulting business and is an expert in helping organizations determine the levers that leaders can pull to meet its strategies. So please, everyone, join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Fischer to our discussion. So Chris, as you get off mute there, I'm going to thank you for joining us today. I'm excited about your participation. As we met and we started to prep for this particular workshop, I asked a lot of questions to you and sent you a lot of questions, and I could definitely feel your energy and passion for the topic. So are you ready to get into this?
You're ready. I thought I was ready, and then I heard you say earlier this is a sexy topic, and I got real nervous that I wasn't going to live up to the tagline. So thank goodness you only see here. I got real like sweat lines. I'm like, how do I be sexy all of a sudden? So thank you, Eboni. I appreciate you let me come and talk with the group and work with you guys. Yeah, a lot of experience with culture, and as a psychologist, work with a lot of different businesses. And so what I'd like to do today is talk about, what is it, from my past consulting, what have I done with cultures and how have I helped different organizations with culture? And then talk about Land O'Lakes and our journey with culture too. You can see up here on the slide right here is we are known for our butter. We're a butter company, but there's a whole lot of other business I'm going to talk about here in a minute that play into what we do, and we are ever evolving with our culture as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about Land O'Lakes' journey with culture. And then I'm hoping to leave you with some tools on how you as leaders, entrepreneurs can look at culture, examine culture, and really shape your culture. So really pleased to be with you guys today. So who is Land O'Lakes? I appreciate the slide right here. We are known as the butter company. You can see right here with the Land O'Lakes logo right there, our dairy foods is one of our most prominent businesses. And we're coming up on our 100th anniversary, actually. So next year will be our 100 years in business. And we started as a creamery. So buying milk from farmers and turning that into sweet butter and sweet cream and selling that on the East Coast. And from there, it kind of took off. And so we are a farm to fork organization. So we buy stuff from our farmers who own us. We are a cooperative too, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then we also sell products to farmers with our Winfield United organization and our Purina organization and our Sustain organization. So Winfield United is really a crop input and insights. And so we have, we provide consulting and information on how to grow crops more efficiently, more effectively. Purina is all about feeding animals and making sure that animals have the nutrition that they need. And Sustain is a newer organization where we give consulting on how farmers can sustainably grow things as consumer trends are changing and consumers are becoming more and more aware of where food comes from, want to know where their food comes from, how it's grown. We help farmers be able to track that and show that and be able to prove to consumers how their food was sourced and what they do with that. So, and doing it in sustainable practices. So it's very interesting how the company has evolved over the past 100 years. And we've always been a cooperative though here. So a cooperative is a very different business model than say a corporation or a privately held organization. We are owned by our customers. So we have farmers that we source from and they own us. And so that has a big driving force in how we make decisions. It has a big driving force in how we show up. It has a big driving force in how we work with each other. It has a big driving force on our culture. And so it is a unique, different business model that has really shaped us over the past 100 years. And we're on the cusp of focusing on that some more and thinking through what do we need to do to be around for the next 100 years. So what is culture? I was so pleased to see that this won by a narrow number, but still it came into 47%. So that pleased me immensely. So I love this definition of culture, but I also like to just simplify it, right? Culture basically is behaviors that get repeated over and over and over again. And so what happens is in organizations, we have cultures that either we intentionally set up and establish, and we try to shape behaviors and shape values and shape the way people show up, or an organization unintentionally gets the culture that they deserve because they don't pay attention to it, they don't examine it, they don't try to shape those values, those beliefs, those ways of behaving, and you end up getting the organization that you kind of deserve. So either way, culture is something that shows up. It's because it's the way that people behave. And so as leaders, we want to think about what is it that we can do to help shape that culture and work with that culture. So here's a model that I have used in the past and continue to use too, in thinking about how organization and leaders can create competitive advantage with culture. And so if you look at this model, we'll start from the top, or from the bottom, excuse me, and work our way up. And you'll see on the two sides here, it's thinking about when it comes to culture, if you can do it the quick and easy way and just kind of do some quick things and some short things, but, you know, and it's not going to be very hard to change, but you're probably not going to have a sustainable change that's going to last for a long time. And so as you start at the bottom of the pyramid there, that is the hardest place to start, but it is the place where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, and you're going to have the most sustainable change. So what do we mean by that? So really by thinking about who we are, what is it that we do, what are our beliefs, what are our values, so that can shape how work gets done. That is that foundation of organizations. And that takes time to establish. That takes intentionality. That takes true leadership to be able to really think that through and establish that and drive with that. I mean, just think about in that video you showed, Eboni, at the front end, Southwest Airlines. Everybody knows the culture that they have. And that didn't happen by accident. I mean, Herb Keller really made sure that he set that culture up and hired for that culture and reinforced that culture and made sure that leaders were just, it was a part of everything that they did. And it was, you know, also the I can't think of the gentleman's name, but the leader of WD-40, that should be the #1 most tattered piece of paper in all of your employees is the values, because we should be opening that up and thinking about that and how do we work within that? And that takes a lot of intentional work. So that's that purposeful culture piece. That next layer up is all about behaviors when it comes to reinforcing those behaviors and getting engagement. And when I think about engagement, you can actually measure employee engagement. And engagement is just really measuring the discernible energy that employees will spend towards work. And what that basically means is I have all the energy that I have, and do I choose to place that energy into my work, or am I going to choose to put that energy other places? And so highly engaged employees believe in the mission of the organization, are willing to put as much time and energy to get things done. And all of that happens because of leaders who are talking about those values and working with those employees and pulling them into things so that they can want to and choose to put that energy into the organization. And then you have to get into the systems pieces of, you know, what's our strategies? How are we going to measure this? What are the rewards around this? Do we have goals that align with where we're trying to go towards? And then that last piece is just the physical tools of being able to, we have the structures, the actual things that people can, that enable our employees to get the work done that they want to get done. So I love this model. I'm going to give 2 examples from it, of one that worked not so well and one that worked really, really well. And this was back when I was an independent consultant. And I was working with a Class 1 railroad. So think really, you know, old school, rough and tumble folks. This organization had been around for 150 years, I think, when I was working with them. And they had kind of this mentality of, we hire people from the neck down. We really don't care about what you think about. We really don't care what you believe. We just need you to get in there and work your tail off and just work hard. Just work hard. Show up and work hard. And one of the things they were trying to change systemically and cultural was to have a more standard way of getting work done. And these were folks that were out in the country and, you know, building railroads, maintaining railroads, and there's hardworking folks that they were called engineers, not like the engineers that were driving the trains, but the civil engineers that were building the track and maintaining the track. And what they found strategically is that if we could, this came from Toyota. They had an executive who came from Toyota and said, look, Toyota had the Toyota way, and it changed the way that we did things because we had one standard operating procedure. We all came at things very standard-wise, and it really made us more efficient, and it got things moving, and we think this would be helpful for your railroad. And so the road said, yeah, that's great. So what are we going to do? They started at the top of that triangle, and they got standardized tools. They had standardized ways of doing things. They said, here's the trucks that you need to go for it. Now we've got standardized, go do it the way that we want you to go do it. And nothing changed, right? People they didn't grab onto it. So new CEO comes in and wants the same strategy to play out. And he starts totally in a different way, and he starts at the bottom. And one of their key values at this railroad was respect. And he came in one day, actually all the employees came in one day and found old style engineer work gloves, railroad work gloves, on each desk at headquarters and on each desk out in the field with a tag that said respect. And it was a whole thing around, we are an organization that has been around for as long as we have because we work hard, we respect each other, we come together when we need to. We've gone through world wars, we've gone through all that stuff. And he just really started from the very bottom and saying, this is who we are. Let's not forget that. And let's really work on becoming what we say our value statement is going to be. And totally shifted the way that the whole strategy was rolling out. And so then I came in and was asked to then think about that next level on the pyramid, which is leadership. And my job was to come in and help leaders learn a totally different way of engaging their employees. Like I said, they thought about, they used to hire people from the neck down, and they were saying, no longer are we going to do this. We need to work with the whole person. If we're going to do the standard operating procedure, we need to have our employees feel like they can improve things themselves and make things work the way they want it to. And so we have to have leaders that are going to build trust, engage the workforce, and have them work with each other in ways that they've never worked with before. So I actually was asked to come in and work with this leadership team, and it was like almost 2,000 leaders that I worked with on how to build trusting relationships with employees that they'd never had built trust with before. And so that was a totally different way of coming at it again, of how do we build trust with people that we've been kind of at odds with in some ways, kind of management versus employees, and one trying to keep the other one down, and all kind of unionized shop, all of that stuff. And we turned that upside down and said, no, we're going to work with you differently and build that trust and build that engagement. And then they talked about the strategy piece as well, of how does this fit with our strategy? Why do we need to do this? How does it give us competitive advantage? Why do we want to have standard operating procedures? And then finally got to the tools piece, and now here's all the tools that you need to make sure that you can make this run most efficiently, most effectively. You can imagine the difference in the way that the outcome was and the impact of that messaging. It took a long time. It's not like it switched overnight and people were like, oh, thank goodness, we're talking about trust and people are engaging with me. It did take time, and it took some work, but it was a sustainable change that because it took that time and that work, it just wasn't here and gone the next day. So that's what culture is about as well, is if you want to shift cultures, you have to be thinking long-term. You have to be thinking about the long game. It's not just going to switch overnight. You really have to be thinking long-term about that. So Land O'Lakes has been on our journey on culture as well. And just about 3 years ago, we had a brand new chief marketing officer come in and really challenge our leadership team and saying, Land O'Lakes is a great company. We're coming up on 100 years. We need to think about how we're engaging our employees. And so actually worked to change our mission statement and our values. So if you can see right there, Land O'Lakes, values and my values, but that feeding human progress, that became our new mission. If you ask me what our mission was prior to this, I couldn't tell you, because it was long, it was arduous, it was not very easy to remember. And then when this came out with Feeding Human Progress, it matched up great with, it's easy for me to remember, and it is something that I could hang my hat on. When I was first asked to come to Land O'Lakes 7 years ago, I'd never heard of, I'd heard of Land O'Lakes, but I didn't know much about them. And I certainly had never worked in agriculture. And I certainly had never worked with a co-op. And I thought, why would you want a psychologist to come in and work with these folks? But the more I read about Land O'Lakes, the more I was engaged in the fact that it was about feeding the world. It was about, we're at 7 billion, we're going to 9 to 10 billion. How do we make sure that we do this job of feeding humans in a sustainable, ethical, good way? And it was something I could really hang my hat on. And it took several years after I was hired before we got to that Feeding Human Progress, but it was a great shift for us. And you'll notice in that slide as well that there's all these different values that we started to land on, and the board voted on and said these are going to be our new values, things like committed to excellence, understanding the value of a hard day's work, and we want to be inspired by the place, our place in the world. And so what I did with that when those new values came out is I decided to almost, you can see it right here, is one side of a sheet saying here's the company values, and the other side of the sheet matching that up with what are my values and how do I live out those values and how is it that I want to show up. And so, for example, you'll see rooted in our understanding of a hard day's work. That's something that really connects with me. I love to work hard and I love to play hard. And so just going through that exercise myself really helped me understand and ground myself in that alignment of the culture that Land O'Lakes is shooting for and how I fit into that. And then I also had my team do the exact same process. So after I had gone through the process of getting that alignment of what are the company's values, how does it align with my values, I showed that to my team and said, here's how I want to show up. Here's how I want to demonstrate to you through my behaviors of how I'm living out these values. So 1, I need you to know. 2, I need you to hold me accountable. If you see me living outside of those values, you need to call me on that. And then I secondly asked them, I said, and I want you to do the same. So take this exercise and come back. And we did an offsite, and all of them came back with their values and how they aligned up with the company's values. And we shared that amongst each other. And it was a very powerful exercise to be able to see how is it that we need to show up, how is it that we do show up, and how we're going to hold each other accountable to showing up that way going forward. So just a simple thing that maybe you might want to think about as in your companies and your organizations and you as leaders, what you can do to be able to make sure your alignment and get your teams aligned around those values. So how do you do this? So Land O'Lakes, like I said, is on our way of changing our culture. Because sometimes culture and strategy don't always align, and we are actually in the midst of making some pretty big shifts in our culture. So you can see our current state culture and our desired state culture, and kind of what are the things we need to do in the middle there. But essentially, why we're having to change this is agriculture is a very interesting and dynamic industry to be in right now. There's a lot of competition. There is a lot going on. Most people think agriculture, simple kind of farmers. It is a high-tech industry where there's a lot of Silicon Valley organizations wanting to get in there. And so competition is incredibly high when it comes to wanting to service the farmers in America, make sure that they're doing it well, and being a part of that whole value stream. And so things that made us successful for the last 99 years may not actually, and they may end up getting in the way of our success for the next 100 years. And so we're taking a good hard look at, what are the things that have made us successful? Things like we are all very dedicated to, long-term future with our people and servicing our customers, being very collaborative based, a lot of hard or really tight relationships, being a very relational organization and industry. Really liking convention, structure, that kind of safety, and I think about Eboni and your quadrant right there, kind of that lower bottom quadrant. And we're needing to shift though, because the ag industry is shifting so quickly, to not get rid of those things. Those are the things that have made us successful. Those are the things that really have made us successful in the last 99 years. So we don't want to just cut off that arm. But we have to think about what are some of the things that we need to add on to while preserving some of this stuff so that we can continue to be successful. So for example, we need to get better at being short-term focused. It is not good that we don't have corporate people coming in and stockholders saying, what you done this last quarter. That's great. But that also tends to pull us away from some of that short term. Are we executing on what we said we're going to execute on? Are we meeting our short term goals? Are we holding people accountable? Those types of things. And what has happened with this too is we have become so conventional that we're a little risk adverse and we're very failure adverse. And so, for example, our CEO just recently embedded what she's calling the Trailblazer Award. And the Trailblazer Award is saying, once a quarter, we're going to look for people who are out there trying stuff out, Doesn't matter. In fact, if it fails, that's okay. Tell the story. We want people who are trailblazing ahead of anybody else, trying new things, and put us out there. So she is clearly setting a message that says, we no longer have the luxury of being failure averse. We have to be okay with people putting themselves out there, trying hard, and failing. That is okay. In fact, we need you to do more of that. And it can be simple things like the last Trailblazer Award was somebody who, in one of our milk plants, had noticed that we were throwing plastic out. And it was some of this plastic stuff that things were being delivered in. They would take this plastic coating and just kind of throw it away. And he found a simple way of being able to recycle it. We actually made some money from this, saved some money from this. It helps the environment, it helps us. And so it's just a simple little thing. But here was this line worker in this milk plant that got a call from the CEO and said, congratulations, you're the Trailblazer winner. So it's things like that that we are working hard to change those behaviors and change that culture. Other areas that we're trying to shift with this then too are simple things like performance management. We are an organization that, and anybody, hopefully, I mean, they can show me some nods, but people are familiar with Garrison Keillor, Minnesota guy. I'm out of Minnesota. You know, he used to do the Sunday shows on NPR, Minnesota, and NPR, Minnesota Public Radio. And he always said, you know, from Minnesota where people are always above average. You know, so you look at our performance ratings, we're always a little bit above average. We're good. No one's great. No one's awful. We're about above average. And that has permeated actually in the way that we rate people. And we don't set good expectations for folks. And we don't hold them to those expectations. And so those are simple behaviors that we have to change. And so we're working on that right now, too, of saying when you are setting goals, be very, very clear on those expectations. And when we come to performance management, hold people accountable to those expectations to the point where we now have to do some stack ranking with folks and make sure that we have a dispersed scale. And that's, but, you know, we're like, God, it's embarrassing. People have done that, you know, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, but we're just doing it now. Why? Because we got to shift our culture. And so while that may have been a practice that's a little bit passé, it's a practice that we need right now to help us get to where we need to be. So again, culture is about behaviors that get repeated over and over and over again. And if you want your culture to change, think about the behaviors that you want to change and how's that ground in some of those values and things that we believe. The other place that this comes in is then how do we have a brand and a look that is going to support some of these culture changes that we are working on. And so for years, Land O'Lakes had been known for Indian Maiden. Mia was her name. She was created in the 1920s and then updated in the 50s by an Ojibwe artist. And she was really a big part of our brand. And we just recently decided to very quietly take her off of our branding and our packaging. Not because we don't, you know, think she's important. It was a great part of our history, but we're understanding that our culture and where we're moving towards now is that we're a farmer-owned organization. We're a farmer-owned cooperative that makes us different. And that's the stuff that we want to be known for. We want to be known for the fact that we, you can see it right on the packaging. We are proud to be a farmer-owned because we share the belief that together we are better. And we are owned by dairy farmers, and we still have that working, you know, side by side. Making our butter is what makes us making butter is what makes us better. And we found that is really resonating with the, you know, millennials and Gen Z folks. And so with that culture change and the way we're trying to shift our organization comes some marketing and branding changes as well. So we're on an interesting journey. So I wish I could tell you here's how it ended up and here's how we won and everything's going to be great. We're kind of right in the midst of it. So more to come on that. Hopefully I can come back on and talk a little bit more about that. But what I want to leave you with is, you know, how do you do this for yourself? So as leaders of organizations or within organizations, how do you think about culture and lead through people through this culture and help change these cultures? And so I love that 2x2 matrix that you showed, Eboni. I think that's a great way of helping think through that. And I think you made a really good point by saying there is no right way or one right culture with this. It really depends on what you're trying to do with your organization and what is it strategically that you're trying to move towards. And so you'll notice on that slide, there's a whole set, you don't have to switch over, I can talk it through, but there's a whole set of of different dichotomies of way to think about it, different continuums from, low process to high process, discipline to, more loose, external versus internal. Whatever those things are, it's not a matter of picking the right one. It's figuring out for you and your company, what are those dimensions that you need to map out? Where are we at currently? And where do we need to be successful in the future? So here's an example of a retail organization that I worked with as they were trying to work with their culture. And it was, we came to these 5 different continuums as they were thinking about their business and the way that they wanted to run their business. And we mapped out together and measured together, where are you now? Where do you need to be in the future? And then I'll show you in a little bit how do you get there. So it was simple things like, task versus people, meaning, to what extent are we people oriented and facilitating those relationships on the people side, versus on the task side, are we about kind of that results, which you showed in that one quadrant? Is it about the, getting stuff done? Is it about execution? Is it about setting expectations, holding people expectations? And you can see the yellow was how we measured where they are at today. So that was where the executive said, yep, I think we're here today. We actually measured it through different surveys of employees to say, yep, this is where we are today. We also measured it through things like walkabouts, which is just simply going into organizations and observing things and looking and seeing, this is, they say they're a highly safety conscious culture, and they have tools up that say, here's, trips, slips and falls kind of things, be careful. And they say they're safety conscious, but right underneath that poster is a bucket of water that's spilled all over the place and no one's picking it up. That says a whole lot more than that poster. And so what you do with this as organizations is decide, what are the dimensions that are going to help us win? What are those dimensions that are going to give us a strategic advantage in the marketplace and help us win? Where are we on those dimensions right now? And where do we need to be in the future? And it can be a simple thing as, where do we need to be in the future is just having people vote with little dots, right? I've done it where I put up a flip chart and I said, here's the things that here's where we're, here's the dimensions. Where do we need to be in order to win? And so this kind of a cultural assessment that you're looking at right here, it's, what do we value today? Things like mission driven, by values, people, community. What do we value for the future? And things I've kind of already talked about with like Land O'Lakes, risk-taking, innovation, empowerment, transparency, accountability, those types of things. And then it's thinking, what are the levers that we can pull to help us get there? So for example, that decision-making piece, this is from a Land O'Lakes example, actually. I mean, decision-making is very collaborative, which is good. But it slows things down so quickly because it's some of that. How are we so collaborative because we're really good at relationships, or are we so collaborative because we're fear of failure? And it's a little bit of both. So we need to get people to make decisions more quickly, more efficiently, and that's things like conflict management. We are so relation based. How do we help people have really good, gritty conversations with each other and be okay with having a little conflict? And being okay with bumping into each other and know that the relationship's gonna be okay. And interestingly enough, we are a very collaborative culture, but we're not collaborative across business units. So we're really good inside the fortress. We're really good at collaborating with our people when they're inside of our walls, but we're really bad at collaborating with somebody who's on a different part of the business or a different function. So trying to break down some of those things. Customer focus versus the 8 headquarters things, and then a very big talent management focus right now on simple things like performance management. Are we hiring the right folks too? And what are our competencies that we're hiring against? Are we developing the right things as well? When it comes to execution and getting stuff done, are we giving our leaders and our employees the tools that they need in order to get stuff done that we need them to get done? So just a couple of tools of thinking about. So, if you think about your own business, what is going to give you strategic advantage? What are those dimensions for you? Where do you think you are at today? Where do you think you need to be in the future? And what are those levers that you can pull to help you get there? Hopefully that's something you kind of take away, and you can disperse those slides. I think that would be useful to help you as you're trying to think about your culture and where you need to take it. So with that, I was also asked, what are you reading right now? What would be helpful? So 3 books. There's probably a few more I could have put on there, but the middle one is one that I think is great. For culture, it's kind of my Bible when it comes to culture. Larry Sin and Jim Hart wrote that, Winning Teams, Winning Cultures. It's a great book. It's very good from a theoretical perspective, but it gets very tangible and very tactical if you're looking for, how do I assess my organization real quickly? There's tips and tools and things in there that really have helped me as I consult with organizations and even with my own work with my own teams. The other one I like it too is that change management on the other side there too, and that's actually another great one. They have a model in there called ADKAR. So anytime you think about culture change, you got to think about the people change, right? And change management is all about the people-dependent return on investment to any change process that you're going through. And this book really lays out real well of, how do you make people aware of the change? How do you get them motivated for the change? How do you build their talents and their skills around that? And then how do you reinforce it? Really, really good book in that way. And then lastly, I've really been liking Principles by Ray Dalio, I think is how you pronounce it. And I follow him on Twitter and different things like that too. He is a hedge fund billionaire. So I've been following his Principles to help me. It hasn't helped me with that yet. I'm not a billionaire yet, but I keep trying. But he takes kind of like his life and how he has found specific principles of the way he shows up and the way he makes decisions and the way he does things. And it's just a very interesting way of thinking that I think really feeds into setting cultures and establishing cultures and thinking about how people change and move them through them. So I was asked what I was reading. Those are the 3 books I would suggest. So with that, I've said a lot. I'm going to take a sip of water. Thanks for letting me chat. I'll hand back over to Eboni and we'll kind of go from there.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. That was pretty amazing. A lot of good information. I loved it how open you are about some of the things that are going on at Land O'Lakes and how you guys are purposely shifting your culture. We do have a couple of questions that are coming through in the chat room, and I believe we have a few minutes for questions.
Absolutely. So this is Brian. I'm going to be the voice of the chat. You can't see me, but you can hear me. And I want to kind of get the ball rolling here with a great question that we have. And then I want to really invite all of you, if you're viewing right now, this is the time to put your questions in the chat so that we can capture them and ask Dr. Fischer his thoughts on what it is that you're seeking. And feel free to be as pointed as you want, as specific as you want, as self-addressed as you want. We really want you to get as much value out of our time with Dr. Fischer today as possible. So as we're waiting for more questions to enter into our chat, I'll ask you, what is most important for small business owners to think about when it comes to how they manage their culture?
That's a great question. And So I used to work with kind of family-owned businesses and small entrepreneurial businesses back in the day. It's kind of with those smaller businesses, it is about the entrepreneur, right? People are following you because they are engaged by you. They are impressed with you, your charisma, your leadership, all those things. And so it's really thinking about, how am I carrying myself? If you were a small business or even that entrepreneurial business and you want people to follow you, it's really thinking about, how am I showing up? What are the things that I'm doing? Because your people are really following you. Thinking about large businesses, it might be a little bit different, right? They're more attracted to for Land O'Lakes, for example, when I was first being recruited by Land O'Lakes, I didn't know the CEO at that time, but I was very impressed with Land O'Lakes' vision and mission and those types of things and values, etc. Whereas a small business, that's probably less important. It's going to be more about, what is that person doing? What is that entrepreneur doing that attracts me to that person? So really be thinking about your own personal behavior and how you're showing up to attract people and get them. They will watch your behavior and know that is the culture that we're going to have.
Awesome. I heard a lot of model.
Yeah.
And we do have a question from, I believe it's Tara Jenkins, which is, when you define the current culture and desired culture, there were elements that you said you wanted to keep in the current culture, while some elements may not support that strategy. How will you create the right mix, particularly when you are moving to a more execution results oriented, which can stifle collaboration as an example? How will you make sure that you don't swing in an extreme direction and that is a more moderate shift if you're wanting to maintain some of those older structures?
Yeah, and it's been a lot of discussion with that. We are taking that question very, very seriously. And we always ask ourselves 3 questions. And those 3 questions are, one is, what do we need to preserve? Meaning, what are those things that have made us successful, that have helped create the culture that we want to create, that we have to preserve? And then the other piece is, what is it that we need to add on? What are some of those behavioral pieces, value pieces, new ways of doing things to help us get to that next level? And then the third question is, what do we need to let go of? And that's the hardest one. What are those things that we need to stop doing that have gotten in our way at best and have actually started to pull us back and hurt us, to be honest with you? And so an example of that is we need to add on being more explicit with our expectations with people. And so that is an add-on. What we're preserving, though, is that we still need to hold that relationship. We need to really be able to preserve that relationship and keep that we're cooperative, right? We believe we're better together, so that there's that human piece of that. And the piece that we're having to let go with that is that conflict management piece, though. Like, we have to let go of always being nice, if that makes sense, right? Minnesotans are known for being Minnesota nice, if that makes sense. So we're really good at smiling at you and tell you're a great person, and then we turn on and go, that business, I'm so stupid. And so we need to let go of that Minnesota niceness. So we're always asking those questions. What do we need to add on? What do we need to preserve? And what do we need to let go of that's going to help us move forward?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Fischer. That's brilliant. And we have, in my institution, we have something called the conspiracy of kindness. That's how we refer to it. Yep. It's the same thing where there's more to it, but you can't see that. So thank you so much for that insight. And we also have another question. It was really kind of 2 questions, which in the first one is, what motivated the shift of culture for Land O'Lakes? Like, what made them decide, oh, we need a shift in culture? Yeah. And then how do you measure success? How do you know that you've made sufficient shift and that you're actually headed toward that desired culture?
So the driver was the marketplace. Ag industry is shifting so quickly, and we have competitors coming in that we've never dealt with before. And honestly, they're starting to kick our butt a little bit, and that had never happened. And so we got caught on our heels quite a bit. And so that was the driving force, is new organizations entering this ag industry that had never been in there before, things shifting so quickly, and us not being able to shift fast enough to keep up, that strategically it was either shift or die. So that was the impetus for this. How do we know when we're going to be successful? We're actually measuring, from a culture perspective, we're measuring our culture. And there's kind of measured in 2 ways. One is employee engagement, which we talked about, and we do regular employee engagement surveys. So we check on how engaged are our employees, and then how enabled are they to get stuff done. And then we give that information back to managers and make sure that they work with that. And the other way that we're measuring it, it's called the organizational health inventory, which is very culturally based as well. And so we took the OHI, the Organizational Health Inventory, earlier this year, and we've set very specific goals of how we want to see behaviors change over the course of this year. And regardless of COVID, all that stuff that has gone on since we did this, we're still pushing forward with that. So that's the other way we're going to measure that. Are we really living up to, and by assessing ourselves, really. It's just assessing and reassessing. And then probably the other way that we're going to measure is success in the marketplace. Are we starting to win again? Are we winning customers back? And are we executing against what we said we were going to execute? So it's about those business results.
Yeah, thank you. Which is really great. Connecting conscious capitalism to bottom lines. That's those are the lines we're constantly trying to draw. So thanks for helping us draw that line. And so I got one last one for you, and then we'll have Eboni go ahead and wrap you up for the day, and we appreciate your time. This last one is interesting. So the ag industry, this one comes from Sherry. The ag industry tends to be one of low margins and an older average age. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the hardest cultural changes that you've had to overcome while also respecting that space?
That's great. Absolutely right on both of those. Commodities, low price commodities, while dealing with folks that are older. One of the things that we're really conscious of is that the farmer is changing though too. and we've actually done some work and research around what does the farm of the future look like? And we've kind of segmented out, quite frankly. It's just some simple segmentation, looking at mindsets, personas, how do people approach things. And those farmers that tend to be a little bit older and more commodity-based and not willing to innovate and change are not going to be around in the future. And so the ag industry, even farmer-wise, is shifting to two segments that are very future-oriented. They're not risk-adverse. They're willing to take on new technologies, innovation, all those types of things. And so we're trying to one, still work with all farmers, but understand who's going to make it by when, and how do we aim ourselves to be able to best serve those farmers that are going to survive and help those folks both now and into the future. So it's very dynamic right now. It is an interesting industry to be in. So it's fun. Great question.
Great questions. Chris, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing all the information and all those examples from Land O'Lakes and from your various experience. I can't thank you enough for your wisdom. And at this time, I'll just leave a couple of parting thoughts about culture. A couple of things that Chris noted. First of all, that it's never too late to change your culture. As you can see that different organizations are always thinking about culture. It's never too late, and figure out the right dimensions for you. Conscious culture is an important pillar. It's also a very powerful force in our companies and our organizations. And so I really encourage all of you to really spend some time thinking about your personal values and how they connect to your own company, and spend some time being very deliberate and purposeful about your company's values and how they nurture and respond to the cultural needs of the company as we walk this journey towards success. I leave you with a question, a couple of questions. What if we truly believe that we really have the power to create an environment that embraces love and care and trust and integrity? What if we all believe that conscious culture not only brings our businesses, conscious business to life, but actually brings us to life? So that's my parting question. I want to thank everyone for hanging on and listening to all this culture talk. And I want you to make sure that you hang on for just a couple more minutes. I want to hand things over to Tanya to share a little bit more about Conscious Capitalism Central Maryland chapter and some upcoming events.
Thank you, Eboni, and thank you, Dr. Fischer, for taking on this deep dive into culture. If you want to learn